a serious discussion I'm trying to tonight about the ridiculous situation this government has left this country in. Now, I'm a supporter of Boris. You might as well go to the loo, Ash. You're not needed anymore. I am concerned seriously now about the fact we have withdrawn our troops from Afghanistan. The Taliban are now taking over. I mean, you obviously know more people than me, but I have friends who served in Afghanistan. A lot of people, of course, have come back horrendously injured, and nobody talks very much about that. We talk about the tragedy of the over 400 guys who lost their lives. A lot more people were injured, and we've walked away as if it never really mattered. And it seems to me to be the most grotesque thing we've done for a long time. Why did we do it?
Well, I think it amounts to a betrayal of not only Afghanistan, but also of all of those who fought there and those who died and suffered severe wounding from our country, from the US and other countries. Probably the worst betrayal, though, is towards the Afghan people, who expected a lot from us, who were promised a lot by us, and who have received, a great deal so far. But that now ends. So I think the reason why is just a lack of political will in the United States, particularly, but also here to a lesser extent, I think. And I've often heard that there's no popular support for the Afghanistan war in the US. But of course, popular support is largely influenced by political leaders. That's what they're there for. And because they haven't, for a long time now, really supported what we've been doing in Afghanistan, it's hardly surprising that a large part of the population would also have done so. I think that's the reality. President Biden clearly thinks it's to his electoral advantage to pull out. Maybe it is.
I mean, do they not understand? Are they so stupid that they don't understand that it will now become a hotbed for terrorists, for training them, for sending them out into the rest of the world, out into America, out into Britain, out to other countries? That's what's going to happen again. We have not had, touch wood, any major terrorist attack, thank goodness, for some considerable time. I'm led to believe by people in the know more than me that it isn't a question of it's all finished. It's a question of just when the next one happens, and it will. And this will make it possibly more prevalent.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, not only immediately Biden announced he was unconditionally withdrawing from Afghanistan, some might call it unconditional surrender. The Taliban immediately claimed victory. And of course, jihadists around the world have been repeating that and have been inspired, and they will be motivated by that, by what they see as the US defeat by the Taliban. They will be motivated by that, carry out jihadist action all around the world. And equally, we will see jihadists flood into Afghanistan if the Taliban take over a large part of the country, flood into Afghanistan as they did before 9/11 to train, to organize, to meet each other, to plan, and to carry out attacks outside Afghanistan as well as inside. So it's all. I would say we're probably going to see a threat, at least on a par with the high point of the Islamic State, facing us again now because of this action.
And would Trump have stayed in? Do you think he would have?
Well, Trump also wanted to pull out.
Yeah.
The difference between Trump's decision was it was based on conditions. It was not based on, as Biden's was, an unconditional withdrawal. We're leaving by the September 11th, no matter what happens, what he said. Now, Trump conditioned his proposed withdrawal on the actions of the Taliban. Now, I don't know. We can't tell what would have happened had Trump remained president. I suspect he probably had somewhat more robust and realistic advisors around him who might have influenced him in a different way when the crunch came. It's quite clear that President Biden's advisors, who obviously are hugely influential on him, think differently.
Well, they're still carrying out actions, though, aren't they, from the air?
Who?
The Americans. Well, there was a B-52, wasn't there, yesterday?
Yeah.
Was it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, the Americans are still providing air support and logistic support and funding for the Afghan security forces. But actually, there's one thing I think that trumps all of that, which is the morale impact on the Afghan security forces of the announcement that we're going, and then the rapid departure of so many international troops, including pretty much all the British and most of the Americans now. And morale is one of the most significant factors in war. And when you undermine morale like that, which it certainly has done, you see the results. And you've seen the rapid advance of the Taliban, the failure in many cases of the Afghan security forces to stand up to them. Some of them fought very bravely, some of them fought very hard, but others have simply melted away or even gone over to the side. Yeah. And it's all to do with morale, more, I think, than the reality of hardware on the ground.
Were you not consulted as a former head of British forces in Afghanistan by politicians before they made this stupid decision?
No, I think I'd probably be the last person they'd consult. But, you know,
why?
Well, I mean, it was a long time since I was there. I have my opinions, others have theirs. There's plenty of other former senior and much more senior officers than me who share my views and have made them known. I don't think my opinion would make any difference really to any of them. The decision, even the British Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter, expressed severe reservations about leaving Afghanistan. But of course, no one took any notice of that. We've had the British Defence Secretary saying he tried to muster a NATO coalition without the Americans to hold the line in Afghanistan with the Brits. But that didn't come to anything. And I'm actually very doubtful as to whether it was ever intended to. I don't think the British government wants to be there, whatever they say. And I think they're happy to be going, and they will never return if they can possibly avoid it.
Well, I think that's ridiculous, because what we're doing is leaving ourselves wide open for terrorist attacks, as we have already discussed. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Boris. He's a nice guy, but he has to get tough. We can't go on like this. I mean, we're going to apparently send people to China to take part in the Winter Olympics. Why are we not sort of withdrawing any cooperation with them at all? Why are we not kicking out? I've just heard that the Chinese company over here making nuclear reactors. How on earth do we allow that?
Well, it's incredible that we do. It's true that we do. We don't forget, only a short while ago, the British government reversed its decision under Boris Johnson, reversed its decision to allow the Chinese Communist Party company Huawei to play a major role in the 4G internet infrastructure in the UK. And many of our allies, including the US and Australia and many others, warned us against doing it. We persisted with it, and then I think only when coronavirus raised its head did the reality somehow begin to dawn, and the decision was taken not to have Hawaii. We still, as you say, I think, plan to allow the Chinese to build nuclear power stations over here and take part in building nuclear power stations, a potentially catastrophic mistake. Now, I do believe also that the British government is looking at how it can pull out of the deals that have been made on.
They are, yeah.
But it's, I mean, another thing, I think another factor related to China and Russia and other countries is Biden said we were pulling out in order to focus more on China and Russia and dealing with them. But the reality is that our departure from Afghanistan will signal those people we're trying to influence towards us and against China and Russia. We'll say to them, well, why would we do that? The US is no longer a reliable ally. They desert their friends at their hour of need. Why would we side with the Americans?
They did it in Iraq, didn't they? I mean, they did it in Vietnam. I mean, there's a history of it.
Well, they did it in Iraq, and let's not forget after they withdrew in Iraq, and the reason for the withdrawal, when I say they, I include us, the reason for the complete US withdrawal from Iraq was for President Obama's electoral reasons, and it led directly to the rise of the Islamic State and the necessity to reinsert US forces and British forces into Iraq.
I mean, I'm getting more and more fed up with this whole American thing. I had a friend who, because I'm so old, in Vietnam, and there were a few British troops in Vietnam. I remember being about 18 and thinking I was going to be drafted and sent there at one time, because that was on the cards. You're probably too young to remember, Richard, but there were a couple of Brits who went over there. And one of the things they complained about with the Americans, that the Americans didn't have changed now probably, but they used to chew gum, which apparently the Viet Cong could smell from miles off, and they used to wear a lot of scented aftershave when they went into the jungle as well. And of course, most troops smoked when they were going to war. I hope we've changed now. I hope the Americans have changed. I don't think the Brits ever behaved like that.
Well, I can tell you for sure the Americans do not behave like that, generally speaking. I think Afghanistan, to some extent, was a low point for the US Army. It was partly, it wasn't entirely, but partly because political support for that war was lost in the US, and you know it was almost a foregone conclusion several years before they pulled out they were going to. But I've certainly worked alongside the US forces in numerous places, including Germany, Balkans, Iraq, Afghanistan, and they certainly are not as you described them today. They're a very highly disciplined organization. They were transformed by a number of generals after the Vietnam experience because of that Vietnam experience. And I don't think there's any, particularly when you take into account the size of the US forces, there's really nothing in the world compared to them.
I mean, in that case, we need to. It's difficult because we can't have our forces deciding to take over from the politicians. That would be terrible. But there must be more. There must be more input into, the idea for us after all the lives that were lost, all the people who were injured, and the fact that there were Afghan families beginning to live a much better life over there. And we had 5,000 soldiers, something like that, over there, and the Americans had more. But it was actually keeping the peace. We weren't involved in fighting anymore, and we just take them out, and the whole place within a matter of weeks has just gone to pot, literally, probably.
Yeah, well, certainly literally, or gone to heroin. But the problem is, as I mentioned, the morale factor, which is very, very significant. But also, we failed, I believe, over many years to properly control the Afghan government. We left the Afghan government to do as it wished. Now, that you might say that's what we should be doing. It's a sovereign government of its own country. But the reality was we were making huge sacrifices and paying vast amounts of money. So we should have ensured those sacrifices were worth it and the money was being properly spent. We didn't. We effectively, from I think around about 2004, 2005, increasingly handed over proper autonomy to the Afghan government. That government is deeply corrupt and largely incompetent, and that's another reason why the Afghan forces, many of them, won't fight for it. Afghanistan is a very tribal country. Few of the soldiers have an proper allegiance to Afghanistan to give their lives for. They will for their tribes, but that's also because they would be more willing to do so. I think were they fighting for a decent, proper, non-corrupt government? Well, they're not, and they know they're not. So they think, why would I give my life for that? And they basically melt away in some cases. Not as I say, not in all cases. But that was one of our greatest failings. Effectively, I think if we were going to maintain significant presence there, and continue to fund it to a huge extent, we had a responsibility to control the Afghan government, like it or not. Without that, we can see the result.
Last question, Richard. What worries me is I think that there will be some kind of terrorist attack. It might be in this country, it might be in America. I'm pretty sure they'll want to make their mark in some way. If that happens, I hope it doesn't, but if that happens, can you see us going back over there and putting troops back in again?
I think it's highly unlikely. I would certainly see airstrikes probably continuing after all other US forces have withdrawn, drone strikes, manned aircraft strikes, special forces operations perhaps. But maybe some British involved in that as well. But I certainly don't see, and I may be wrong, but I don't see a reinsertion of British troops or American troops back into Afghanistan in large numbers. It may happen if there's another 9/11 type catastrophe. That may be the case. The other thing we haven't mentioned, the other really potentially damaging issue is refugees. That refugees, the more Afghanistan takes over, it's already happening. The more the Taliban take over, the vaster the number of refugees pouring out of the country will become. and that many of them will come here to Europe. Afghans are already the second largest refugee population in the world, and they're about to become even larger.
Not a lot of good news to look forward to in the next few months and into the next year, I suppose. Richard, always good to talk. Thank you very much indeed for your time.